Shalom, everyone. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every single one of you, and welcome to another episode of Seeds of the Witness. So, the objective and the intent today is to get right into things in order to be able to cover as much as can be covered, because I'm not able to get the opportunity to outline things and to teach as often as I would like to at this time, due to the circumstances that have been allowed. But if you remember, we have been covering the information that will allow us to have an accurate perspective on the things that are moving in the world today as prophesied in Scripture, which validates then the prophecies given by the prophets, which we now have, as Scripture, and authenticates them as being men sent by Father Yahweh, that those things being fulfilled is evidence of their office. They start speaking it, and the words of Yahweh's servants are fulfilled. Not, just in a hodgepodge mix of things, but targeted and specific. Iran. And then Iran starts moving. And that, of course, validates what's taking place in that individual's life, just as the great prophet Moshe told us. But if you remember, the name of Yahweh in which the prophets speak is itself representative of knowledge and wisdom and understanding concerning that which was, that which shall be, and that which is, right? And if you remember last episode, what we were talking about is what is, that aspect of Father Yahweh's name, and communicating knowledge concerning it from what the scriptures offer to us. And with that, you remember we were speaking about affairs in the Euphrates region, as we will get back into in just a moment. And, really this whole thing taking place with regard to the world being reshaped. They're calling it a new order of things, because the old order has run its course. Even though people all around the world caught up in various things having to do with entertainment and activities related to fun might not be able to see it, but for those who are actually using a piece of their brain, and no insult to anybody else, because what we do from day to day in large part is a result of the training that we receive, and the training itself is by design. But for those who are paying attention to and who have access to certain knowledge, they are the ones that are saying that the present course of things has run its course, and something new has to be set up that they hope and intend to last for another a century or so, or two, or however they suspect that it might work out, but it ain't. So but it's all it's all bound in that fourth part of the earth, the area in and around the great river Euphrates, if you remember from the last episode, that was spoken of by the faithful apostle Yachanan. It's like the only one, at least the scriptures show, speaking about the prophets and the things that they have to go through, and in their affliction. Yahshua, the great and honorable high priest, Yahshua. He is the high priest, but he's also a prophet. He was regarded as being a prophet and acknowledged that he was a prophet in Scripture. And, he was embraced as a king, and people threw their talits down on the road and, and brought him into the city as royalty. And when certain people in office, certain priests came at it wasn't all, certain priests came at the man to kill him, everybody left him. Everybody left him, including the one who thought himself, proved himself to be strong later, but thought himself to be the strongest amongst them, even at that time, keeper. But Yachanan was, he was one of the first ones to come back, at least that the account shows, at the end. But he spoke about the end times, and Messiah knew about it too. I'm putting up this is how time gets eaten up. But it's coming. But he knew it. He was speaking about his beloved one. He acknowledged that. So it's like he understood a great deal. And for as much as people for disbelief. We thought he was this and we thought he was that. And some people said coming down the road, the priest came at him, he turned out to be nothing. And for other people who it wasn't disbelief so much as it was fear. Man, these are powerful men. They ain't playing, man. They killing people. They're turning people into nothing, that kind of thing. But for whatever one reason or combination of reasons, they left the man all alone. And he knew it was going to take place. Beforehand, he said, all of these people getting ready to leave me. Oh, he's the king, he's this, he's that, All of these people getting ready to leave me. But I won't be alone because I'll have you. And what more does a man need when he has Yahweh, And so that was his confidence as much as it has to be everybody's confidence in Yahweh today. But, just that for what had taken place even with Messiah, who was also a prophet in the course, when you're called after that order, the affliction and the things that a person has to endure and experience because something real is taking place with regard to building within individuals was needed to occupy that office. A person has to understand the entirety, well, not the entirety. Yahshua does. He has as much access to understanding Yahweh's plan, and the scriptures actually say complete knowledge. And then he's revealing it to other people. Well, to one person at first, it was initially the great witness. It was opening the seals to the great witness. Also said, yeah, he's opening it to his house, and he's capable of sending people thoughts and all of that kind of thing. And whole conversation about whether or not a person qualifies for something like that. But so. He was also a prophet, and being after that order, there are things that they just have to be put through in order to have the strength and the quality of character needed to occupy that office on into forever. I was looking at a quote earlier. Oh man, I'm talking like I better be looking at the clock too. But it said sometimes people get it. There's just frequencies floating around, and rather people know that the entirety of what they're talking about, and not sometimes people just say things that's just right on the money. But it was said that the road to heaven is hard. The road to hell is easy. With the hard-headed person going through all of this adversity, and then with the person who's on the road to hell, you basically just had an example of a lack of restraint, like a person just indulging themselves in some of any and everything, which will literally ruin you. You're not gonna go too long, making decisions like that. But it's true, because there is a heavenly kingdom coming. The whole idea of heaven, there's been deception concerning that, but there is a kingdom in heaven. There are heavens and there are kingdoms in heaven. And there is a kingdom being established that's going to govern heaven. All of that's true. But once again, whole other conversation, but it was just the irony in that, like the road to that kingdom and having a position in that kingdom is hell. It's hard. But the way into hell, that's just so easy. The only thing you have to do is just abandon yourself. But the responsibilities that they're going to have, and talking once more about the prophets, is what requires them to have to go through the things that they're allowed to be put through, because it puts something in them. And just as much Messiah as any other person who's ever held that office. That's just how it is. The prophets are going to, the prophets, the teachers, the strong teachers are going to have a very, very, very strong leading role in the kingdom that's being established. Every man after his own order, right? And for that, it'd be best for, in many cases, for people not to speak too quickly concerning things, as was cautioned to us by the great teacher. When you see things taking place, even people outside the house, be too quick to run your mouth. You don't know what's going on. You might end up speaking about things that are too high for you. It'd be best to just focus on one doing their absolute best, and with regard to what they've been called to do, the job that they've been called to do, where they fit into things. But okay, so we were talking about where the events now fit into the timeline of prophecy and events that are given to us in Scripture. And what it really boils down to is the Middle East, it being reshaped, which is tied in directly to the expanding of the borders of Israel. That's what this all boils down to. They're saying Greater Israel now, acknowledging it publicly. There's just tons of information out there concerning it. One of the articles that we had looked at from Oslo to Trump, which there's some knowledge being given there. That's where it started with Oslo, the 7-year peace plan that was prophesied of. That's now done and over with and gone. On up until today, when they're still there in the Middle East, doing their best to reshape it and to mold it and to make it as much Israel's as they can, all over to the great river Euphrates. But all right, so that I wanted to read you another article on that, though. This is all the prophecy given by the great prophet Micaiah. I think it's Micaiah in the King James Version. Let me see. But yeah, Micaiah chapter 7:11, where it says, "In that day," speaking about Israel, "that your walls are to be rebuilt." And you can just look over there in the side note if you have a book of Yahweh. If you don't, then you don't have that benefit. That would be a great incentive for one to get one. But it says, "The day that your walls are to be rebuilt, that day your boundary will be far extended." So that lets us know that those two are tied into each other, that they go along with one another, that they're moving at the same time. This whole effort to extend the boundaries of Israel over to the great river Euphrates and all the way back to humanity's beginning in the Nile Valley, which is where humanity began, in Africa, in the Nile Valley. That's where the very first house of Yahweh was. That's where mankind was first established as a population. And of course, they grew out from there into the Middle East, the same pattern of which we saw, after the flood and so forth. But that whole plan is what's taking place now to move the boundaries of Israel all the way over to the great river Euphrates, as far as the great river Euphrates, and as early back as the beginning of time, the beginning of mankind's time here on earth, which started in the Nile Valley. That is the greater Israel. I wanted to say plot, but plan. That is the greater Israel plan that the United States is now backing and behind, and it's tied into, once again, the rebuilding of this temple. So the article that I wanted to read, which is just further evidence of that, along with what we read the last week, and we won't be able to get to that today. For anybody who's unfamiliar with that information, unacquainted with it, didn't see the episode, you would have to visit or revisit that in order to get it. But it says, this article: amid Iran war, Israel seals off Al-Aqsa Mosque, an unprecedented move. So for those who are acquainted with the prophecy related to Al-Aqsa Mosque or Al-Ham Sharif, the other referred to as, once again, the Temple Mount by Israelis, and everything that was brought to them by the witness, then you already see where this is going. But it says, amid Iran war, Israel seals off Al-Aqsa Mosque, an unprecedented move. And we'll have to skip through a bunch of this, but it says, throughout his life, Dr. Move this over a little bit, Sway has performed congregational prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque alongside thousands of worshipers. Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway, he's the custodian of Al-Aqsa Mosque at this present time. Educated in Catholic schools, was groomed and educated by the Catholics, but he's Muslim and he's over Al-Aqsa Mosque. for whatever that's worth. Even during the COVID pandemic closures, dozens were still permitted to pray at the mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites located in Jerusalem's old city. But this week, for the first time in his life, he found himself praying alone with within the vast 144,000 square meter complex. Even the guard wasn't there, he said. Abu Sway said the Islamic Waqf, or he's the leader of the Islamic Waqf, which is a religious endowment, so on and so forth. Not really trying to. Here's the part that I want to get to. Lockdown at Alaska. It says lockdown at Alaska. The closure of Alaska Mosque came into effect on Friday morning, shortly after Israel launched strikes. Israel launched strikes on Iran. Worshippers were forcibly removed by Israeli forces following dawn prayer, and the mosque gates were sealed shut. Only Islamic Waqf workers responsible for maintaining the mosque have been allowed entry since. The entrance has a checkpoint, he continued. The closure, now entering its fifth day, is unprecedented in recent memory. In 2014 and then in 2017, Israeli forces briefly closed the mosque amid heightened tensions in Jerusalem. Okay, that wasn't the part I wanted to get to, but all of that's relevant. Changing the status quo is the part of this article. Beyond the immediate frustration of being locked out, Palestinians fear Israel is using the current crisis to impose lasting changes on the historic site. With the world's focus now divided between the wars on Gaza and Iran, many worry Israeli authorities are quietly advancing plans long resisted by Palestinians. Israel is using war conditions to impose new restrictions and realities, said Uni Babaz, the director of international affairs at the Islamic Waqf. Babaz and others point to a long-standing Israeli effort to divide Al-Aqsa Mosque both spatially and temporally, restricting Muslim access during certain times while gradually increasing Jewish presence under police protection. So at the exact same time that the efforts are being exerted, Palestinians being emptied out of Gaza, another prophecy to cover at another time, with the intent of expanding Israel's borders, half of it they want to be Israel, according to what Kissinger was saying, if you remember the last episode we covered. There's also this effort to rebuild the temple, which is not going to be some extreme thing where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is completely taken out of the picture and destroyed, and the whole entire thing is going to be the temple. Though people might have had ideas like that initially, with the education that was given to him coming forth from the prophet who understood prophecy. Part of what made him a prophet is he understood prophecy. The prophecy given in Yeketcha about the division of that Temple Mount, which was given in the next temple to building, the peaceful solution to building the next temple in Jerusalem, with that information being communicated now to that community of people, all of those ideas are just radical and put out there probably just as a negotiating tool to scare people. We could just take all of it, but we're going to let you have some of it. The hardball kind of an approach. But really what people's minds are situated now is, after having gotten that information, dividing it because they know where the old temple stood now. So this is what is being spoken about here when he said that they're trying to divide this temple. What they're trying to realize is the information that was brought to them by the last days only witness Israel Abel Hawkins about the rebuilding of the next temple given in the book of Yeketcha, who was called Ezekiel in the King James Version. But now, okay, so it says they've been working on this for over 20 years. Since that information was brought to them, they've been working on this because they just like he said in his teachings and his preaching, that when they saw it, their eyes got big. Everybody knew it was it, on both sides. Everybody knew it was it. And they've been working on this for over 20 years, he said. Sadly, 99% of this plan, he says, has already been imposed under the shadow of the war on Gaza. And this is, information coming from, a news source that's situated over there, which is why journalism is one of the most perilous, one of the most dangerous professions in the world today. They're killing them. It doesn't make the news of other journalists all the time, but it's one of the most dangerous jobs a person could have. Like they're killing journalists left and right to keep the reporting within certain boundaries and certain information from being exposed and getting out. But this article is giving it. That he says 90% of their efforts to try to get the temple divided and to get the Temple Mount, to get Al-Haram Sharif, to get it divided and the third temple rebuilt, already having brought in red heifers and everything, as other information has been brought out concerning it. They've gotten the majority of it taken care of already. So this is the 99% that he's talking about. This plan has already been imposed under the shadow of the war on Gaza. It's become a reality. Abu Diab echoed the concerns. The eastern section of the mosque, he says, Bab al-Rahma, has effectively been turned into an undeclared temple. An undeclared temple. So once again, confirming the words of Yahweh, but put into the mouth of a minor prophet, a Micah or Micaiah as it is actually, showing that this is the expanding of Israel's borders. The day that your walls are to be rebuilt, when this temple is going to be rebuilt again, that Yeketcha spoke about, and that at that same time, there's going to be an effort to extend your borders. It's going to be far extended, as far as the river to the sea, the great river Euphrates, all the way back to mankind's beginning in the Nile Valley. So all of that for a follow-up on what we were covering then, and all of this ties into, if you remember, the writings of the great prophet Jeremiah. Time is flying. Concerning what was going to be taking place in the Middle East at this exact same time. Because we're saying Israel's borders are going to be far extended, which is true, but it's general. What we're really talking about are nations being destroyed in order that Israel's borders would be extended. A bunch of lands that are going to be taken over. If we take precept upon precept, line upon line, no scripture stands alone by itself, along with what Micah is speaking about in this particular prophecy that he's given here. And one of those lands is definitely Iran. It's definitely Elam. And if you remember, getting back to that scripture in Jeremiah, that would be Jeremiah, if you have the King James Version, chapter 49, in verse 35, it says, "This is what Yahweh of hosts says, Behold, I will break the bow of Elam," which is Iran, as we covered. A person could look into, I don't know, you might be able to get it just from a Brown, Driver, and Briggs, but if nothing else, the other lexicons that give more in-depth information, like Julius First and those kinds of lexicons that you have to be acquainted with Hebrew to be able to access, they definitely say this. We're talking about Elam, we're talking about Persia, we're talking about Iran when we say Elam. But it says in 35, "This is what Yahweh of hosts says, Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the principal support of their might. I will bring the four winds," if you remember, the four winds against Elam from the four corners of heaven. "I will scatter them to all of these winds, so that there will not be a nation to which the outcast of Elam will not go." So remember, that one ties us into, in order to understand that makes any sense whatsoever. There's a bunch of other things given throughout Scripture that a person would have to be aware of and tie into it in order to understand it. Right? And an understanding is the coming together of those pieces in the mind, which takes place either as a result of the effective working of the teacher or by inspiration directly from Yahweh or Yahshua. But okay, so in Revelation chapter 7, as where we get another bit of information that helps to bring clarity to what the great prophet Jeremiah is speaking of there. He's talking about the four winds and the four corners of the earth and all of this. But you get over to chapter 7 and verse 1, if you remember, it says, after these things I saw four Malachim standing on the four corners of earth. Same thing we were just reading. Holding the four winds that it was spoken of there that are going to be let loose onto Iran and bring its destruction. And remember, we were speaking about that whole idea of the winds. Is you look into it, it's speaking about violence, the same violence that we're seeing today. And these four who are actually, you have to tie other things into this. We're speaking about the four, and we did last episode. These are the four active that are in that region of the Euphrates, trying, at least initially they were established to try to bring, peace to the region, but they're failing in their efforts. And now, they even have other objectives, and there's definitely something to be said as to whether or not those objectives weren't there from the absolute beginning. But this four, of course, is talking about the quartet. And that's if a person has their scriptural mind aligned correctly, then the whole entire process that Messiah has been telling us to undertake, if we're to be in the right way from the time that he was here last and taken up, is to watch. To watch for what? See how fast birds fly. Is to watch for certain events that are given in Scripture, that are given in prophecy, in order to confirm Father Yahweh and his existence and the reliability of his word, but also the progress with regard to his plan, which, all the way up until the time of mankind's severe destruction and depopulation here on this earthly warfare, to the establishment of his kingdom, here on earth, and all the way out to the universe. But watch, right? To watch things. So a person then with that information, especially if they've been educated to know, they're watching for four powers that are going to arise in the Middle East, in the Euphrates region, who are involved in trying to hold back violence, trying to hold back destruction. And that's exactly what the quartet is. So that if you have your mind right, you say, if you're watching, there they are. And that's exactly what took place with the witness, who then brought that information to the world, so that we know now today, and being able to see it for ourselves with it being pointed out, that four being spoken of here in Revelation chapter 7, and in other areas, even that one in Jeremiah chapter 49, are the quartet today, which is the United States of America, the EU, the UN, and Russia. Even though they're at odds with each other, they're a product of a system that's set up that way. A person has to keep that all in mind with regard to it. The adversary, they're part of a system where the adversary has turned every man against his brother. And of course, she's trying to do that even amongst Yahweh's people, and it's been successful at doing it from the beginning. She's been successful, even within the house of Yahweh, where people are resisting her having her way, but definitely out in the world where she has her way entirely, outside of the house of Yahweh where she has her way entirely. Every man against his brother. You look into that word against, and it just means competition. So you have the quartet. These people are supposed to be working together on a team, but there's competition among those of the team. They have competing interests. So for this, you see the conflict among them, where a lot of times they aren't on the same page, even though they're supposed to be on the same team. But that's what we see taking place here in Revelation chapter 7, is the emergence of that. And there's articles showing it. Like here, another article that was released recently, speaking about the war on Iran. It says Trump says 2 weeks is maximum for Iran, one of the quartet, which is the United States of America. It says 2 weeks is maximum for Iran decision. And then in reading it, it says President Donald Trump said Friday that Iran had a maximum of 2 weeks to avoid possible U.S. airstrikes, indicating he could take a decision before the fortnight deadline is set a day earlier. Trump added that he was not inclined to stop Israel attacking Iran because it was winning, and was dismissive, and here goes the point to catch, and was dismissive of European efforts to mediate an end to the conflict. The European Union. So it shows you that they're all wrapped up together, in this thing that's taking place in the Middle East, in the Euphrates region, involving warfare and what's going to be done, the messaging, the diplomacy, and all of this that's taking place to decide how best to handle this situation that's taking place in the Middle East and all of the concerns there. So, the EU isn't often spoken of, but it's definitely one of those four. And there goes an example, of their interactions there. And there's been, other articles that have come out earlier, like with Russia, who was speaking about how the United States of America is basically isolating, everybody else and setting itself up as basically the lead of the four and really only concerned with achieving its interest, which is, I don't know that there's any line in that at all. But at the same time, I believe that there's a lot of self-motivation on all sides. But so with all of that having been said, that's the correct perspective for the now. And the great prophet Remy was exactly right. During that time period where the boundaries are being far extended, Elam's going to be wrapped up in that thing, and they're going to be moving against Elam to destroy it, and the temple, to look at the other prophets' writings, they're going to be moving to rebuild that, and we also see that in motion. And all of this represents the correct perspective and mindset when a person has an understanding with regard to the is, was, is, and will be, the is. Speaking of Father Yahweh, and what he's prophesied concerning the events that will occur from mankind's beginning until the end of his rule under the guidance of Satan the adversary, and the nuclear destruction that it will bring, that would eliminate all of those who have any opposition to the establishment of the kingdom of Yahweh, the reestablishment of the kingdom of Yahweh, here on earth. So I say reestablishment because, of course, it started out with one tree, and then the other tree was basically composed of those, and all of this started in the Nile Valley. It was basically composed of those who made the decision to go their own way. All right, so all of that for correct perspective with regard to Middle East affairs. I know one of the big things that's moving today, one of the big questions that's being asked among those who are informed after having seen all of this manifest between Israel and Iran, not for the first time, is this, and it was mentioned last episode, and giving people a basis to begin peeling back the layers of information related to understanding the Quartet and prophecy. The book that was recommended to get in order to start that process was The Birth of the Nuclear Baby. That was the book that was recommended before that last escalation. But the question for some is, is this latest exchange of missiles between Israel and Iran the fulfillment of that? And there could be a direct answer to it, but I believe it's best to probably mention other things. What takes place, and this is a problem that occurs, with other things. It has occurred. Something can be said as to whether or not those problems would occur if certain things were just allowed to be done by the people that Father Yahweh, who has obviously, as we saw with the great prophet Remy, planned even before the world began, and called after that order to do particular things. Certain mistakes can be avoided entirely, but it's a covenant thing. At least the glory associated with it, the honor and stuff is associated with it. People don't want the drama that come with it, though. You can leave that part. Being tossed in a fiery furnace, they don't want that part, but you have to be willing, though, for that part, if you're going to have it eternally. Even though no one asked for it, like Yahshua was like, man, if it could be taken away from me. And Daniel And his companions with the things that they were faced with, they answered quickly. But you imagine it's like if he doesn't do it, he can. But if he doesn't, but if he chooses not to, okay. But either way, we're not going to do that though. You can rest assured of that. We're not going to allow that to be subject to, be a part of, participate in any way, something like that. That part, there's no question at all with regard to. So I say all of that to say the difficulties occur when certain things begin to take on a life of their own. Certain individual details begin to take on a life of their own. Like, for example, with the 7-year peace treaty. It's 7 years, right? It's 3.5. There's a break, and then there's 3.5 years of the Oslo Accords. Now, once you got all of the details in your mind, so okay, if there is no Oslo Accords, then there is no 7 years. The Oslo Accords is what initiated the beginning of the 7 years. There was the teacher who spoke to us concerning it, said that it started up and it was going to go straight through. It wasn't going to stop, and all of the media, the journalists, everybody reporting on it afterwards, basically established the truthfulness of his words. It went in so much as after a set period of time, they were all like, Oslo is over. Like, even the architects of it, the people who were involved in putting it together, is like, Oslo is done. And so you have somebody that's still saying, we're in the last 3.5 years with Oslo gone. Like, how is that 3.5 years without Oslo? Like, the ones that they're, and so it's the same thing with the birth of the nuclear baby, or something like certain dates that have been given. The date by itself, it doesn't stand alone. The date by itself is tied into nuclear warfare. And so if you don't see nuclear warfare, then you haven't seen the fulfillment of the nuclear baby. The nuclear baby isn't fulfilled by somebody having a skirmish on a particular day. But a person will have to know the scriptures, is what I'm saying. So, for example, there's we could look at, I'm not sure we have enough time to, but I would want to go to, and speaking about this quartet, go to Revelation chapter 9. And it says, and I heard the last molic, well, I think I have that crossed out, I have the correct one, which is last molic sounded. And I heard the voice from the 4 horns, that 4, remember we discussed that, referenced in different ways, at different times, but nonetheless speaking about that 4, and in so much as it is different, it just gives different or more information concerning them. But the voice of the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before Yahweh, saying to the I think it's 6 that I have crossed out, but I have last molic, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 which are bound in. Once again, there's a number of different prepositions that work there. What you have to understand is prepositions are decided upon based on the understanding of the person who was communicating and the person who's receiving it. But it's based on understanding. You don't find prepositions in scripture. You get back to the Hebrew and all of that kind of, and even in language, in English language, if it's the way that something is progressing is what determines what's being said. The intent of what's being said is what determines the preposition. So there's a number of different prepositions that work there. One of them is definitely in, and another one of them is definitely for. Speaking about these 4. The other way, F-O-U-R, and the Great River Euphrates. They're bound in the Great River Euphrates. They're starting in the Middle East, where people are saying it, man, like they're reshaping the Middle East. That's their objective. That's the goal. They're reshaping the Middle East. But they were also, at a certain point, they were bound for it. That's what started it up. Them heading towards it in that region, and things kicking up, and then also they're bound for it in the sense that their goal is to push the boundaries of a particular nation. That nation, of course, is Israel, all the way to the River Euphrates and to the Nile. Is what Israel wants anyway. Israel definitely wants back at the Nile, because they know. But it says, and the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for a day and an hour and a moon, in order to slay a third part of men. All right? And so this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the nuclear baby. It's something that's going to slay a third part of men. And then when you get down, we're in Revelations 1 chapter 9, and at this point we're reading verse 18 after having read verses 13 to 15. But at 18 it says, this is how the third part of men are going to be killed. You can look that word up. It means destroyed. The same destruction that's spoken about in other areas of Scripture and in Jeremiah chapter 49, as we were just reading. The lamb is going to be destroyed. Let me see. We were talking about. I don't know if we need to go back there, but it makes me think of it. Just because we're running out of time. There's a couple things I want to make sure to get in there. But it says, lamb, well, the four winds, principal might, four winds against the lamb, I will scatter them. So it says, this is what Yahweh holds. Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the principal sport of their might. I will bring the four winds against them. I will scatter them to all of these winds, so that there will not be a nation to which the outcast of Elam will not go. Elam will be terrified before their enemies, before those who seek their lives. I will bring destruction upon them. So verse 37, this destruction is going to be brought upon them. Speaking of Iran. And when it's talking here about a third of man being killed, you looked up that word kill, and it just means destroyed. One is talking about a verb to destroy something, and the other is just a noun, which is destruction. It's the thing that's taking place. That's the destruction. That's the only difference. It's speaking about the exact same thing. And we see here that this destruction that it's talking about for Elam, for Iran, but potentially definitely not just them, and definitely not in terms of the effects that are going to come about as a result of it, is going to be brought about by fire and by smoke and by brimstone, which are the three colors of nuclear warfare for those who are informed, right? Well, no, that isn't the three colors. The three colors are given earlier in verse 17. The fire and the smoke that it's talking about is a reference to verse 17, where it gives the three colors of nuclear warfare, which are the fire and the jacinth and the brimstone. And then here in verse 18, it says that's how men are going to be killed. Speaking about that same fire, though it doesn't mention jacinth there, it does speak about the brimstone, where it says that by these three, by that fire and by that brimstone that we're speaking about in verse 17, which is just the colors of a nuclear explosion, and everybody that's ever written on it in detail have given that information, the different colors that take place when a nuclear bomb is exploded. So that's what it's talking about. That's what a person is watching for. Not just a date and somebody shooting at each other, especially people who've already been shooting at each other. It is the manifestation of nuclear destruction, of nuclear warfare in the Euphrates region that is the birth of the nuclear baby, when a person has all of the facts and details, the information together on it that's been presented, and the teaching with regard to it by the great teacher who now rests awaiting resurrection, but information preserved in the writings from his sermons, and also in the book The Nuclear Baby, which tells us clearly what the birth of the nuclear baby is, and also in Scripture, where it speaks about it in a number of different places. So we're running out of time a whole bunch. I'm gonna go a little bit over because I want to make sure to get this point in, because as I said, I don't have an opportunity to that's one area speaking about the nuclear baby. They let you know what it's going to be, what these four are going to bring about. It's nuclear war. It's not just the same shooting back of missiles and stuff. that has been taking place for a while now. Even between Iran and Israel, they've been shooting back, missiles back and forth a few times here in recent times. But if we get over to Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 5, and like I was saying, I wanted to get this all in because I don't have an opportunity due to the things that have been allowed in Yahweh's will. Yahweh's will be done to be able to do things as I was doing them at one point on ideal conditions for being able to roll up your sleeves, get into teaching, and then communicate that teaching and in an impactful and in a strong way. What are you going to do? I will not be a party to speaking about certain details. It will just be kept among brothers for right now. But at the same time, it's it's all part of the information that's been furnished for the fourth volume of the Book of Yahweh. I think I said third last episode. It's actually the fourth volume of the Book of Yahweh, having now been authored and potentially completed as much as I'm aware of. But it's just like so many other things, how many of those, and exactly what, that will all be determined by Father Yahweh. But it's definitely, it has definitely been put together as instructed. But so speaking though about this subject here, which was also covered in the fourth volume of the Book of Yahweh, is the nuclear baby, the birth of the nuclear baby. And people that would say that's just ridiculous. This is what establishes the fact that it is not. It's like you heard not knowing the scriptures. That's why you think it's ridiculous and it sounds crazy. But it says, concerning the times and seasons, brothers, you have no need that I should write to you. Times like, and we do, the times, like times, and half the time. And the seasons that Messiah spoke about in Matthew chapter 24, for example, when you see a tree and it's bearing, that kind of thing. It's not just guesswork. The time spoken of by Daniel, for example. The seasons spoken of by Yahshua, for example. So that you have no need that I should write to you. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Yahweh comes as a thief in the night, comes as a thief to those who are in the night. But hopefully you're in the light. But for those who are in the night, it's definitely going to come as a thief. For when they will say peace, true peace, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. They will not escape. So that's what we're talking about. That same destruction that we were just reading of, where it says kill, but you look into it, it means destroy. And it's that killing or that destroying is going to be a third of the people over that fourth part of the earth, and it's going to take place through something that produces yellow, and that produces jacinth, and that produces the color of brimstone, which are the three colors of a nuclear explosion, so that the person whose eyes have been opened is able to see that, and they know. It's speaking about that same destruction, right here. So it's speaking about the nuclear bomb that's going to come forth, a nuclear destruction that's going to come forth as labor pains upon a woman with child, and hence the idea of a nuclear baby. And it's not just there, it's in other cases too, in definitions and so forth, where it speaks to that kind of thing. So it sounds crazy, and it's laughable, and it's funny, okay, you heard not knowing the scriptures, and it's a real thing. And when it does manifest, it is going to be, not just a skirmish, that occurs, this occurs on a particular day, but it is going to be nuclear warfare, right? And it's going to take place as labor pains upon a woman with child, one more intense than the other for the most part, until eventually it manifests. Another way that was described by the great teacher is things are going to iterate and to reiterate. And I wanted to get into that because, that's exactly what's being said now, by certain people. And then we'll close on this, because this has been a bunch. But, and this is an article that's that was produced by by NPR, I believe. But speaking about the the United States and Israel and them going after Iran's nuclear program is what it was talking about, and the one that's buried deep under the ground and what it would take in order to get there. Saying Israel can't get to it. It would have to be the United States that gets to it. But if the United States joins the war and gets to it, then Iran is definitely going to retaliate by going after American interests or American targets in the region. But it says, Aaron David, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a nonpartisan think tank, echoed that view. Even strategic bombing doesn't do it, he says, without occupying the country, which they intend to do. They intend to take over Iran, he adds. It will be nearly impossible. Instead, Israel is likely to rely on a mowing the grass strategy with the expectation of striking again later in an iterative process of setting back Iran's nuclear program. Iterate. It will iterate and reiterate until it yields certain conditions, is what the great teacher taught. Which is that the same thing with labor pains. You know, they come and each one more intense until the baby is out. You know, and hopefully well and joyous, though crying for the fact that it's been taken out of what was his home for a little bit. So I just wanted to touch on that, and we can touch more on it at another time. That information having been brought out, and they're speaking exactly according to it. The iteration and the reiteration, which are the labor pains upon a woman with child, as labor pains upon a woman with child, that's going to yield the birth of the nuclear baby, which is a nuclear strike in the Middle East on Iran. Definitely, at least Iran, and that will be the birth of the nuclear baby. But there's another article that was produced where it says by, I believe, Foreign Affairs, where it says that speaking about this same thing, they're saying that Israel would have to engage in an iterative process in order to do it. But in this article, they were saying, no, really, they don't even have the means to do it. It would have to be America that does it. And they were saying, but by subcontracting that job out, that will put the United States in Iran's sight. Iran would almost certainly retaliate by killing American civilians, like I was saying before. That in turn would compel the United States to reciprocate in an iterative process. So once again, this all the process is what we're seeing. Iteration after iteration, iterating and reiterating until it builds its labor pains upon a woman with child into the birth of nuclear destruction that will kill 1/3 of the people over that fourth part of the earth, just as we saw given to, revealed to, open up to beloved apostle Yachanan, whose name is called John in the book of Revelations. So that's all we have time for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Join us for another episode of Seeds of the Witness.